Hello, I'm Mark Naneman. Today I'm going to talk about how to set up OAuth 2 authentication in a custom connector in Power Automate to connect to an external API service. And in this example, we're going to be connecting to ArcGIS. So I am by no means an expert in ArcGIS. I've just dabbled with some of the pre-built connector options in Power Automate. You have actions like geocode and address or reverse geocode and address. Now, there are some endpoints, some actions that are available in the API documentation that you won't find pre-built in Power Automate. One of them is this suggest action. And what the suggest does, you've probably seen this on forms that you filled out online. When you start typing in an address, a drop-down will appear immediately with some suggested, completed, and well-formed addresses that you could pick from to basically auto-complete your address. So this action will take a string prompt that could be incomplete, it could be malformed, it could have typos, and it will find a list of best suited completed addresses to return for the prompt. And like I said, this is not available out of the box, but you can set up a custom connector and then use this endpoint. And that's what we're going to do today. Now, the first thing I need to do is create a trial account with ArcGIS if I don't have one already. And that's what I've done. I've created a free trial account. I think they give you 21 days and $400 in credits or something like that. So here I am in my trial account. And what I need to do is I go to content, and I've got to do two things to use that suggest endpoint I was looking at. One thing I need to do is I need to create something called a locator. So what you need to do in your content tab, you click this new item button and you select locator. And I want to create a locator view from the ArcGIS geocoding service. And I just give it a title. I give it any tags I want to give it, and I give it a summary, and I hit save. I've already made one, so I won't make another one. I've actually already made two. I'll click on this one right here, the first locator. After you create the locator, it'll take you to this page showing you the locator info. And you want to make sure you're on the overview tab right here. And then you scroll down and you've got this URL. And this URL is what you would actually use as the base URL for your endpoint for actions under the geocoded service. So if we go back to that suggest that we were looking at before, so here back in the documentation, if we look at this suggest endpoint, we see that it's just your geocode service URL, and that's that URL we were just looking at in our locator, and then we just put a / suggest at the end of it. So that's what you need this for. So either leave this open in a tab, or copy it and save it somewhere, or just remember how to get back to it from your content, because we'll need it here in a couple minutes in our custom connector in Power Automate. The next thing you need to do is you need to create developer credentials for your ArcGIS service. So we'll do that next. So here under your content tab, you'll hit new item and you'll go to developer credentials and you can hit next here. We're creating OAuth 2 credentials. The first thing it wants is a redirect URL. And this is very important because if you notice in Power Automate, when you connect to an API service, even one of the pre-built ones, oftentimes there's a pop-up and you have to type in your username and password, or you have to paste in an API key or something like that to connect to the service. And the redirect URL is what allows that pop-up to appear for you. Now, we actually don't have the redirect URL yet. We need to create our custom connector in Power Automate to get that. But we can put something in here temporarily. I'll often use the default Postman redirect URL because often when I'm setting up a custom connector or playing with any API, you're in Postman to test things out a little bit. It's a great tool for testing out API calls and requests and then working them into your Power Automate workflow. So here in Postman, I've already experimented with these APIs in ArcGIS a bit, but I'm going to show you right here, it's called a callback URL in Postman, and I'm under the authorization tab on my request. So this is where I set up the OAuth 2 authorization to get a token to be able to do these API calls in Postman. But if we just look at this callback URL right here, this is what we could type into our developer credentials wizard in ArcGIS to use as a temporary redirect URL. It also allows us to test our credentials in Postman as well as in Power Automate. So we just type this in right here. It's OAuth.postman without the vowels .io/v1/callback. Okay, so now I've typed in that temporary redirect URL. If you notice, you can add multiples. And so we can leave this in here forever if we want. So we've got that in there. Refer URL, you can put this in, but you don't have to. But if you're building like an app or you're having a portal site use this, you could put in your domain here. We'll go ahead and just skip that. I'll hit next. On the next screen, we need to give it some privileges. I'm going to turn on location services. That includes geocoding here, so I believe that's all I need to be able to use that suggest endpoint. But you can go back to the documentation and review what privileges you need to give your credentials to be able to use that service. I'll hit next. I'm going to go ahead and skip grant item access. Now I need to give this a title, so I'll say Power Automate Custom Connector. And we can give it tags if we want to. We can give it a description if we want to. Demo for my Power Automate Custom Connector video. Then you hit next. Now you can review and hit create. So give it just a moment and it will generate your credentials for you. And it will take you automatically to this screen right here. And we've got this credentials section, and we have our client ID, we have our client secret, and we have a temporary token. And again, we're going to be needing this information in just a few moments inside of Power Automate, so we'll want to leave this open in another tab. We're also going to need to come back here and update this when we get our actual redirect URL from Power Automate. And to change that, we're just going to click this Manage button right here, and we'll be able to add or edit our existing redirect URLs. All right, next we go over to Power Automate, make.powerautomate.com, and we need to get into the custom connector section. So I've got it pinned right here on my left menu. If you don't see it there, you can go ahead and click the More button, and you can go to Discover All if you can't find it here, but you'll be able to find it eventually. Let me hit Discover All. And custom connectors right here underneath data. So you look for the data section and you've got custom connectors there. So you can just click on this and this will show you any existing custom connectors you have, and you can just go up here to create a new one from blank. We can give it a name, ArcGIS Demo Connector. I've already made a few of these. One just testing out the first time, the other time for my blog, and so this will be the third one for the video. So I hope I gave it a unique name. Once you're here, you can give it an icon, and I did that. I downloaded this icon from the internet. So I upload the icon. I found a PNG on Wiki Commons, I think, Wikipedia Commons or Wikimedia Commons. And if you notice, it's a transparent PNG. So we've got this ugly gray background, and we can change that here by doing, give it a background color, and I'll just give it the code for white, which is hashtag and then 6 Fs. So now we've changed the background to white. Now just a note, this is going to be frustrating. It's frustrating for me, but anytime you click Create Connector or later on when you update it or save your changes, frequently Power Automate loses whatever icon you uploaded, and it'll throw this little annoying error at the top. The error nothing's broken except for your icon is missing. So you want to keep your icon on hand because you'll be coming back here and re-uploading it and then clicking Update Connector quite a bit if you're making changes in here. So first we need to give it a description. We can just say custom ArcGIS connector for video demonstration. And then down here for the scheme, we leave it on HTTPS. And then the host, we need to put in the domain of the endpoint we're going to be using. And we can find that by going back to our locator in ArcGIS and looking at that URL. So here I am back in ArcGIS in my locator, and I'm looking at this URL down here, And this is the part we need. Just that part right there that ends in .com. So we copy that, go back to Power Automate, and we paste that here. The base URL, technically you could put the rest of the URL from ArcGIS right here, but to make it more flexible, you can just leave the base URL with this /. But if you were sure that every endpoint action you wanted to add to this custom connector was going to have the same stuff coming after this .com right here, you could paste that right here just to like leave it simpler down the road. But it's not necessary, so we'll just leave it as this /. Then next I click security. Okay, so here we are at the important part where we set up our OAuth 2 authentication for our custom connector. So you want to be in this security step 2 security. And by default, it's going to say no authentication. You need to change that to OAuth 2 down here. Now, at first glance, you're like, how can I do that? It's grayed out. Well, you just got to uncheck no authentication. It's a little counterintuitive, but you uncheck that, and then you can check OAuth 2. And so now we have our form to set up our OAuth 2. We're going to need our client ID and our client secret, and those are from the developer connection we created in ArcGIS, so we can just toggle back over there. So here I am in that Power Automate custom connector credentials item I made in ArcGIS, and we just copy this client ID right here, paste it, do the same with the secret, copy your secret, paste your secret. So now we've pasted our secret in here. Okay, the next step is we need to find our authorization URL and our token URL. Now these can sometimes be tricky to find, but they're usually in the documentation for your API service somewhere. You just look around. Usually you'll find it. You can look for like a /authorize and a /token. That's usually at the end of the URL endpoints that you need. So here I found it on this section called ArcGIS REST APIs, and it gives you an example usage. So it has here https www.arcgis.com/sharing/res/OAuth2/authorize. So let's just copy that. We'll put that here for the authorization. And then next, let's look for the token. So here I'm under this OAuth 2 section. We're under authorize, and here we see the token. So let's go to token, and it gives you the example usage here. So we've got this endpoint, basically the same, except it's OAuth 2/token. And setting these up, it's always going to drive you crazy because you're going to have 3 or 4 different tabs open at the same time. And it's always a chicken and an egg sort of thing because you need your client ID and client secret to set up your custom connector and get the redirect URL, but you need to give a redirect URL to the credentials or service that you're creating the credentials in. And so you always got to start somewhere. You usually have to give some fake info like the fake redirect URL we did earlier. So here we paste our token URL here. And for the refresh URL, if you didn't see a refresh token URL in your documentation, just go ahead and reuse the token URL. Scope, we can leave that blank. Some APIs you'll connect to, you set the scope, which is basically the same thing as the privileges we set earlier, or it's similar. You can set that here. But since we set privileges in our credentials and ArcGIS, I'll just leave this blank. And so now for this important part, the redirect URL, you'll notice there's nothing here, and it says save the custom connector to generate the redirect URL. So we just go up here to create connector and click that. This will actually save and create the connector, and it will auto-generate a redirect URL down there. Okay, it takes a few moments to save the first time, but now it's completed. So we're still here on our security tab after it reloads, and we see down here we now have this redirect URL. Also, you'll notice the client secret will be blanked out. Don't worry, it saved it. It's just not displaying it for you. We can click this copy button here to copy our unique redirect URL. And again, this is necessary for creating that pop-up where you sign in and give approval to allow your service to be connected to Power Automate. So to connect everything, we need to copy this, and then we need to go back to ArcGIS and paste it into our credentials there. So here I am back inside ArcGIS, and I'm in my Power Automate custom connector credentials. I'm going to go ahead and hit Manage, and then I scroll down and I look for redirect URLs, which is right here. And we have that Postman one we use. Let's go ahead and hit Add, and then we'll paste in what we copied out of Power Automate, and it's this link right here. And then we can just hit Save. And it tells us it was successfully updated. Great. So now we can move on. We can go to definition in our custom connector. So right now we've got our custom connector set up, and we've got the authentication set up. So we're most of the way done. So now we can create a connection using OAuth, and it'll handle all that in the background after we log in and click connect. But to be able to do anything with it, we need to add at least one action here, or a trigger. You could also add a webhook trigger. Now in our case, we're going to use that suggest endpoint that we were looking at. So we're going to click new action, and we're just going to get this set up here, and we give it a summary. So these first parts, the summary and the description, these show up in Power Automate when you're searching for the action you want to add. And so the summary is kind of the title, and the description is a little bit more information that you can save in there as well. So let's just say addresses from prompt. Operation ID, this is like, if you're familiar with Dataverse, it's similar to like the logical name. So it's just a name for your action, but it has to be unique. So if you have a bunch of actions you're adding in here, you just need to make sure they're all unique. So you can just do like lowercase suggest, will work just fine. Visibility is important. We need to have it on either advanced or important. If it's under important, then we can find this action in that menu in Power Automate. When you search for a new action to add, you'll see it pop up there. So sometimes when you're in Power Automate, you might notice when you're searching for an action, you'll see the name of the connector, for example, SharePoint, and it'll have some actions listed there. But if you click See More, it will show you many more actions to choose from. The ones that are hidden under See More, they are set to advanced, basically, so you can kind of hide to clean up the suggestions when you're looking up what action to add. You can save some of the ones that you want to have available, but you don't want to take up space in the search. You can save those under advanced. If you want them to show up in the search, you just set it to important. Now, once we've got this set up, we need to actually add our endpoint. So we hit import from sample. Now here, to get this right, we need to consult with our documentation. So here, looking at the documentation, we see that we need our geocode service URL and then /suggest. We also see that the method is a get method. And another important thing we need to look at is what parameters are required. So we look here on the table of contents for this page, we see request parameters, and we scroll through this, and basically you want to look for the ones that are required, and then you also want to look for any of the ones that you want to add. For this video, to keep it short, I'm just going to add the required ones. So I see this F parameter is required, and this is for the response format. It says the default is HTML, but we can also do JSON or PJSON. The other required parameter is text, and it's just a string. Basically, it's the prompt that it uses to suggest completed addresses. So we need to add F and text, so just remember that. But we still also need to get this whole URL here, and that's back in ArcGIS under our locator. So we need to hop back into ArcGIS and find our locator. So here I am back in there. I'm in my content, and I'm looking for my locators, and I see this My First Locator, and that's the one I'm using. So I click on that, then I scroll down, and I'll just hit copy on this URL to the geocode service. So we'll go ahead and paste that in here. And I'll just note that since this is the host we provided earlier, we don't even have to put this in here. So we could delete it out and just start with / and then the rest of the URL, and it'll work fine. You can also leave it in and it's not a problem, but I'll go ahead and remove it. And then we need to do a few things. If we remember that documentation we just looked at, we have to put a /suggest at the end. And that's how we call the endpoint for the suggest action. We also need to add those parameters that are required. So we do that by adding them in here as query parameters. So you'd put a question mark, and then you just put the name of the parameter and then equals. So I'll start with that F. We have F equals. And if we remember, the options were HTML, JSON, PJSON. I'm going to want this in JSON, so I'll just hit JSON here. Also, another thing, what I'm typing in now, I'm just giving it examples. It's going to parse this to create basically a template that it'll use. So whatever you type in here, it'll as a value, it'll go away. But we'll just type in the right value type. So I typed in a string. That's all that's important right here, is that this is a string. And the same thing for the text. So to add the text parameter, I hit an and sign. Then I type in text, equal sign, and now I just need to type some string. So I'll just type some string. And we need to make sure the verb is set to the method in our documentation, which we remember was get. Now I hit import. So now if you notice here, it parsed out the F and the text as query parameters appended to the URL. So that's good, but we need to still do some more. So let's hit edit on the F. And the more we need to do, the important thing is we need to just tell it if it's required or not, and it is required. So let's hit yes. And we can also set a default value. And I want the default here to be JSON. The other very important thing is to set the visibility. Right now, by default, it's got none, but we want it to be important or advanced. If it's important, when someone adds this action to Power Automate, it's going to be expanded and show that input field for this parameter, and it'll be waiting for input or for someone to change the default. If it's under advanced, then it'll be hidden under the advanced link on that action in your Power Automate designer. So you'd click advanced, and then you'd be able to find this parameter from the dropdown. It might not be advanced anymore. It might be a dropdown now. I can't remember off the top of my head. So I'll set this one to advanced, and we have the default that's JSON, and we check the type is string, and that's correct. Now the other thing we can do, we can give it a description here and a summary. So the description, this would be just to give the user, to help guide the user on how to use this field on the action. So we'd say response format of the API response JSON. And then it'll autosave. You just need to click the back button. So we set up the F. Now we need to set up the text. Same thing here. We need to say, yes, it's required. And we want the visibility on this one to be important, since there's no point in using the action if you're not putting something in here. And the format, the type is string, that's right. And we can do the same thing here with the description and summary. So the address prompt I'll just say address prompt for the summary. I believe the summary is going to be like the title, the label you'll see above the field when you're in Power Automate. So you hit back. So that's saved. Another thing I'm going to note for you, if you are comfortable with YAML at all, you can toggle the Swagger editor at any time, and it's a way to make these edits a little bit quicker. So we were editing the parameters. So here we see our parameter name F, and we see that required true, type string, default, and the default value JSON. And the visibility here is advanced. The visibility for the text parameter is important. So if you had many parameters, which some API actions have many parameters, and you want them all available to be used, it's going to drive you crazy clicking into dozens of them and setting them up like we just did. So you can do it a bit quicker in a YAML editor like this. So you could just like copy the settings that you want to duplicate for your parameters and just move to each parameter and paste them in. do things like that, where you could edit it somewhere else and paste it all in here. So that's just something I'll note that's a neat feature that's here. But you got to be careful because it's way easier to mess things up in that Swagger editor. All right, at this point, we are ready to test our custom connector. So let's go ahead and hit Update Connector to save our changes. All right, and here's an example of that error with the icon happening when you update this. Failed to download original icon of the custom connector. So when that happens, if it's important to you, go back here and upload it again. I will note though, if you know you're going to be working in this, making all kinds of changes and saving them as you go, just ignore that until you're done and you know it's pretty much set in stone. Then come back here and re-upload the icon because it'll just keep dropping off all the time. I'll go ahead and try re-uploading it. So I re-upload it and I hit Update Connector. Okay, great. Now we're ready to finally test. So let's go over here to the last step here, the 6th test. We can skip this stuff. The first thing we need to do is set up our connection. So basically here, we're going to be testing our OAuth setup to make sure we've got OAuth 2 set up right. So I click New Connection, and you see I get this pop-up. So this is a good sign. We know that we've got our credentials set up right in ArcGIS with the proper redirect URL because it has been able to redirect the login pop-up to us here in Power Automate. And you see right here, Power Automate Custom Connector. If you remember, that is the title that we gave our developer credentials that we added in ArcGIS. So this has all worked well. Also notice it knows that I'm logged in, and it probably knows that from cookies. So it knows we're logged in. Now, if I had restarted my computer or if I wasn't logged in another tab in ArcGIS, it might force me to log in right here. But it knows that I'm logged in. I have the option to sign in with another account if I wanted to. But all I got to do now is click Allow. Also, if I take too long to do this, it'll sometimes make you log in again. It'll say timed out, and I have to log in again. So here we go. We've got the connection set up right. So round of applause. We set up OAuth 2 login authentication correctly. So now we can test and see if we've got our API endpoint set up right. So down here under operations, we can select from all the operations we add to our custom connector. In this case, we've just added the suggest. So we've got suggest selected by default. We have this F parameter, and it's filled in with the default value of JSON. So for the text, we can just type in some test string. So we want to think of an incomplete address to prompt completed addresses to be suggested to us. So I'll say Springfield, Mo, Starbucks, and I'll just stop right there and hit test operation. So we got a 200 status response, so that's good. And here we see our suggested completed addresses. And it looks like they're all in Springfield, Missouri, and they are all for Starbucks locations. So the API is working pretty well to autocomplete or suggest completed, well-formed addresses from the prompt. All right, finally, let's use this in a Power Automate flow. So here I've got a simple flow I set up. I've got a manual trigger here with a text input called search. I'll just hit the plus here, and let's look for suggest address. So I'm searching my available actions for suggest address. Now they've been changing things up on me. Sometimes in the past it used to show your custom connectors here, but I don't know if it does that anymore. Now, these all look pre-built in. And looks like I've got so many hits, I might not even be able to find them if it does show up there. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and, right now we're on all, but I can go here to custom. We can filter on just our custom connectors. And if you notice, I've got 3 here because I've been doing this multiple times. This was the first one where I just did it as proof of concept. And then I did one for my blog post, and then I did one for this video. I should have put video because I don't remember what I called the one for the video. I think it's this one. So we got to click sign in to establish our connection. Yes, this is the right one, Power Automate Custom Connector. So that's the one I made for this video. Hit allow. So it has used that redirect URL to present us with a pop-up to log in. So now we've got our action here, and we've got the address prompt, and we've got this the format prompt, or the format parameter. So here, I'll just connect this dynamically to the search from the trigger, and now I'm ready to test. And so I'll do that same test string. So Spring, Field, Mo, Starbuck, hit run flow. So it's run. Let's check the outputs here. And it looks like it worked just fine. It's given us all these different Starbucks locations in Springfield, Missouri that we can choose from. Okay, well, that's how you can set up a custom connector in Power Automate using OAuth 2 authentication to connect to an external API like ArcGIS. Thanks so much for watching. If you found the video helpful, please give it a like. You can also feel free to check the blog posts in the description below to see how I connected to this service in more detail. Thanks so much for watching.